Hello, guys. Can you say something so that I control my audio?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, I hear you. So we have the exam next week. So it's going to be on Monday, and you will have 2 hours for your exam. It is going to be 40 questions. And those 40 questions, they include all of the topics that we had. So we start with the presentation feedback or review. Okay, so first of all, of course, thank you all for doing the job because I really liked the whole process. Also, it was interesting to see your way of thinking because most of you actually interpreted the results only by themselves, which means that you didn't look at other people's work, etc., etc. So I've seen it many times before. So when we had those presentations, they would just kind of copy from others. I didn't see it this time, so it was cool, and I really liked that. So about the presentation itself. So of course, because you don't have much experience with the presentations, and I don't expect you to have much experience with this presentation, you all had some problems, and everyone will have those problems. And the main thing here was actually to put you into this kind of atmosphere of presenting your work. And you will be doing it very, very many times during your undergrad studies and also during the master's and PhD presentations. Of course, the master's and PhD level, they are, of course, much more serious, and you will be punished for every single word that you say, for every single picture, etc. So expect people to be very, very tough when you have these higher level presentations. So why it happens? Of course, because the real science starts after the undergrads. Whenever you are in the research project like RA or a student, kind of freelancer student, it does not show you the real science. It actually shows you the glimpse of science, and it is, of course, expected. And you don't really present your work because you just help with the work of others. And in this case, of course, when you start your master's, you will be having this real immersion into this atmosphere of real science. And I hope that today's presentation review and the presentation itself will help you in the future work, so that you understand many kind of simple stuff that many people just overlook when they come to a point when they have to present their work. Okay, so again, thank you all for the presentation. It was really, really cool to see this everything and actually be a part of the presentation. Okay, so we start with the problems now. And first of all, of course, it's teamwork. So the teamwork, as you understand, we made it on purpose because in many cases, you are given this teamwork in the end of your undergrads, and actually people don't know how to approach it. So what we've done the teamwork assignment right at the start of your work, especially I know that many of you are coming from NUSOM, and of course, teamwork for future medical doctors is an essential part of your future work. So expect every single place of work that you will be admitted to, expect it to be a team, because if you're talking about the department, let's say surgical department or therapeutic department in the hospital, there are many interconnections between people. So most probably you will have the head of the department, then you will have few senior surgeons or senior MDs. Of course, as the young doctor, you will be kind of assigned some kind of supervisor from those senior members of the group. And it does not mean that you are the lowest member in this chain. After you as an MD, you will have the nurse staff, and they will be expecting some kind of guidance from you. And after that, you will be also talking to the supportive staff that actually make most of the cleaning job, the preparation for your medical staff, etc. So this everything is the team, okay? And you will have to learn how to work in this team. And the best would be start learning the teamwork from the beginning of your undergrads, because if you don't know how to work in a group, when you get to a hospital, you will have lots of problems. And believe me, I've seen a lot of people who are just lost when they get to a department. And they require actually kind of adaptation period of few months. And this is, of course, inapplicable for a very kind of a very tight schedule of the MD. Of course, you will have all those mistakes, etc., because if you don't know how to communicate with all the parts of these tree, of these intercommunication, then you lose some information, etc. Even the documentation, etc. So, of course, you know that in the hospital you have a special way of documenting your work, and actually every single member here has their own type of document that they have to keep. And of course, if you come and you cannot communicate how to fill in those documents, you will be lagging a lot, and this is very, very bad. Okay, so about the teamwork on our assignment. So I've seen lots of problems with the team, and the main thing here is to understand that your team is your kind of operational unit, okay? So just assume it to be an organism. So in your organism, you have organs like brain, etc., etc. So you have the same. You have to assign some person who will be kind of guiding others. Okay, so you have limbs, you have the body, and you have the head. So there should be somebody who is controlling all other parts. So this is not something kind of shameful to have a person who is assigned a leader of the team. You might actually kind of reassign this role every day. So let's say you have we had 4 people per group, okay? And if all of you are actually having these leadership skills, leadership kind of perception, you actually might assign one person on Monday. Okay, so person 1. Second person is doing job on Friday. Third person is doing job on Tuesday and Thursday. And finally, the last person is doing job on the Wednesday. So it's a dynamic organism. Okay, so the main thing here is to actually see it as the unit, because many times we just don't understand that teamwork is working as an organism. We just assume it to be like, we have a presentation, so title is on person 1, materials and methods are on person 2, etc., etc. So no, it does not work like this. So usually what you have, let's say on Monday, the first person actually assigns the goals. Okay, so you have the goal number 1 for Monday. Okay, so you have Monday goal. In this case, you actually understand the design of your presentation. And of course, the first person has to know something about this design. So you assign this person as the leader, not just because it was a random choice. No, it is because the first person actually done lots of cool presentations, etc. before, so that they know how to present the work in the most appropriate way. So on Friday, so it's actually the last person, okay? On Friday, you actually understand what goes into the contents of your presentation, so the content part. And this content part, so it's Friday, this content part includes lots of work with the structure of the data. So if you remember, we had enzyme 1 and enzyme 2. From enzyme 1, you had the standard curve and the initial rate of reaction, or baseline experiment. Okay, so the person who is leading the group on Friday, they actually assign the proper data that will be used in your presentation as a content. Okay, so they say, okay, so do we need the standard curve? Of course. Do we need the baseline experiment? Of course. Then from the second part, they choose, let's say, the temperature, enzyme concentration, and the concentration of the substrate. So they set the goals, okay, and the team works on the identification of the ways to achieve the goal. Okay, so this is how the Friday person works. Okay, so what happens, let's say, on Wednesday? So the Wednesday person knows how to present the data. So they know how to build a very cool looking graph. They know that we actually have some kind of standard curve. Okay, so they take some information about content and they start presenting it, or they assign goal to present the data. And finally, on Tuesday and Thursday, the last person is actually a very cool, or not, let's say not cool, but the person who is comfortable with math, okay? So what they do, they assign again goals to kind of check the graphs, the content, etc., etc. And they understand that, for example, here we have y equals 0.031x plus 0.046 something, like this. Okay, so they know lots about math, so they know how the data is structured and they know how it is presented. And then they say, okay, so we have a huge problem here. Why we have this problem? Because if we have 0 as x, so your absorbance is actually 0. Okay, so what do you expect here? You know that y is equal to 0.031x plus 0.46. And they say, okay, so if we have 0 absorbance, then this part becomes 0, and we have 0.46. Of course, this is something very unusual, because if you have the absorbance of 0, you absolutely have to have the concentration of 0, right? This is logical. So the person who is doing job on Tuesday and Thursday, they understand this part and they actually say, okay, so we need to somehow remove this part. And they actually do that. So in your Excel, so when you create this graph, well, how do you actually create it? You take the points. So 0, 12.5, then we had 25, 50, and 100. And of course, we had the corresponding values here. So you draw them on your graph like this. And then, so in your Excel, you have some kind of settings close to your graph. So you just click on this graph, and then you see some kind of plus here. And when you get your mouse over this plus, it will give you a list of options. And one of the options is actually trend line. So you click on it, and all of a sudden you have the trend line, which shows you the equation of 0x plus 0.46. Okay. And because there is a person who knows math and understands more, they say, okay, we need to remove this part. So what happens next? Because you now have the trend line and also the equation that is shown on your graph, you go to the right side. Okay, so you go to the right side of your Excel, and there you have some kind of options. And if I remember, there is an option to choose the design of your graph, then data, then something else. I don't remember which one, maybe textual information or textual representation. And in your data, for the trend line, so you click on this trend line and you see it's chosen, okay? And in your data tab, you have something called set intercept. And you click on it, and then you have an option to choose the value for this intercept. And here you choose it to 0.0. So in this case, you remove this part and you might have some kind of change in this coefficient. So what is actually this particular equation? It actually shows y equal ax plus b. So in this case, you have the linear regression, and any linear regression is actually explained by this formula. So what it actually tells you, it tells you where, at which point your graph, linear regression graph, is intersecting the y-axis, so y and x. So if we have 0 here, then we have the y value at which we actually intersect our y value. Okay, so this coefficient, it's also called, I don't remember which one, it was really, really long time ago when I had this statistical course, etc. But the main thing here is actually the dependency of the y value on the x value. So in this case, you have some kind of value here, and it tells you the real meaning of y. Okay, so in this case, you have this intercept, and intercept again is the point at which our graph intersects the y-axis. And in this case, you need to make it 0. So you equalize it to 0 by setting the intercept in the options for your trend line. Okay, so this is about the teamwork. So you had 4 people who are having these leadership characteristics, but of course it's not always happening. Sometimes you have only one person who takes the lead, or you actually might end up in a group which does not have any leader at all. In this case, we have a whole mess in the teamwork. So we actually had one group so from 4 people, 1, 2, 3, and 4, one person prepared a whole presentation. 2 people prepared another presentation, and the last person was assigned to another group. Of course, it means that the failure of communication happened at some point, and of course, this is something that that explains why we made this assignment as a teamwork. Okay. It was easier for us to let all of you do the presentation on your own, but we decided to use the teamwork presentation. And this actually shows the blank spots of your kind of skills, etc. It actually tells those people in the group that they have to work on the development of the skill of working in the team. Okay. Of course, this failure is not the end of the world. So don't assume it to be the end of the world. It just means that you are at the beginning of your journey. Okay, so this is very cool about undergrad, that you actually don't have failures. Okay, so just stop thinking about some stuff that you didn't get as a failure. You don't have failures. Just remember this until the end of your undergrads. Every failure is actually helping you, or every mistake is the help from the professor or from your colleagues, okay? And this help is actually to develop or excel your skill. So let's say you are doing some anatomy course, and all of a sudden on the exam you get 0 mark because you just don't know the bones and the muscles. And of course, it tells you that you need to work on those parts. And if you start working, of course, at some point, these kind of failure will help you because you just become a traumatologist, okay? And of course, was it a real failure? No, it was actually the way to show you your weak points of your knowledge, okay? So if you understand this part, it will be the best thing that you've got from the undergrads. So understand what? Understand that there is no failure for undergrads. Failures or fails, they start happening from masters, but still it's more like the way to, again, excel, develop, or progress in your work. Okay, so what you have to remember from the undergrads is that there is no failure. And many times I receive some kind of emails from people saying that they had the depression based on the problems with their undergrads. So they fail a lot, and because we have lots of pressure from our relatives, from our environment, saying that if you fail, you are absolutely weak person, etc., etc. So this happens just because they don't understand a very simple stuff, that failure is the help, okay, is something that explains you what to work on, okay? And please remember that, because this is something that will save you time, save you mood, and save you lots of great days in the future. When you get to PhD, you already know that you will be failing a lot. So when I started my PhD, I had a very cool conversation with my supervisor. So my supervisor said that the work that I do, which is 100%, will be mostly a consequent kind of ordered list of fails. Okay, so he said that about 90% of the time I will fail. But it is actually showing me that I am working in some kind of direction. Okay, if you have 90% of fails, it means that you have a better probability to success in some kind of question. Okay, so why? Just because you are keeping logbooks, etc. So you know every single fail before your success, and you know well, actually, failing most of the time, you will know the roads that just don't get you anywhere. Okay, so if you remember from the light bulb not discovery, but invention, Edison said that he had 10,000 failures before he succeeded. And it actually means that those 10,000 fails, they were not in vain. They were not to kind of stop doing the job. They were actually to progress in this particular invention. So just remember that, and it will help you. Just believe me. Okay, so this is about the teamwork. So the thing to remember from the teamwork part of your assignment is that you are the unit, you are the organism as the team. And this organism has some kind of goal. And what we have usually, we have the current point, and then we have our goal, okay? And it does not mean that we aim this goal and then we just move to it. No, we actually set some midpoint goals and we get from one to another, etc., etc. And finally, from the prior to last kind of checkpoint, we get to our final goal. So this is how your usual work looking like, and you have to remember that. And now what is different is that you work as a team, which means that some person or some member of the team might be better at this particular place. Another person might be better at this particular checkpoint. What does it mean? It actually means that you have to recruit those powers of those people so that you achieve a better result. So this is the meaning of the teamwork, okay? Now about the design. Well, I've seen lots of shocking colors like non-contrast pictures, non-contrast text versus background, etc. So don't use it. Mind people who have some problems with their eyes. So some people might be color blinded, and believe me, in the scientific community, you will see a higher probability to find the color-blinded person. Why it happens, I don't know. Maybe, well, I don't know why it happens, but for example, in one of my laboratories, I had 3 people with blindness to colors, and this was actually 30% of the people in the lab. So of course, it does not reflect the usual population of people. It just somehow they got into the same place. And of course, when we were making the presentations or slides for those people, we would be using high contrast design. And actually, high contrast design does not mean that it is black and white. But if you don't have kind of sense of design or sense of color, just use black and white. In this case, everyone will be super happy, because if you use some pale blue on pale green, not only people with problems with eyes, but even healthy people, they will have problems reading your text. Okay, so this part is about the colors. Then I've seen some heavy texted slides, which means that you have a slide and you have lots of text in a small font, and reading through it is already a huge pain, but also listening to a person who is reading is a bigger pain. Okay, so just don't do that. Make sure that you know what is on this slide. Make sure that you have some kind of notes in front of you. So you read or you explain stuff that is written in bullet points here, like 3 bullet points. So let's say this part is the first one, this part is the second one, and the last one here. So what you have some kind of note that is in front of you saying, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. That's how you present. Of course, when you present to an audience, not in your Zoom, etc., of course, you will not be able to have those notes all the time, but most of the time it is actually possible to have some kind of small paper that actually shows you the sequence of slides or shows you the critical points that you have to talk about. But the main thing here is never put lots of text on the same slide. What also, if you don't, well, if you actually have this slide and you cannot just remove all those parts and convert them into the bullet points, what you could do, you could actually create 3 different slides. Okay, so first part goes here, second part goes here, finally, the last one goes to the last. And in this case, you will have a nicely readable text and everyone will understand it straight away. Okay, so just if you have to use the heavy text slide, just break it into parts or break it into smaller bits of information that you could present on a single slide. And finally, use more graphical materials. I've seen lots of you doing the background information that was shown as a single slide with the bullet points. Well, then you had to kind of, with words only, explain very difficult, sophisticated part of the enzymatic reaction, so how it works, etc. So in my opinion, it's much easier to use one slide of the background information with the explanation of how the substrate is being kind of cut or chemically transformed into the product. Show it once and you will not need to explain it in your words, kind of getting mixed up, etc. And this will lead to a better understanding of the whole presentation by your readers or by your listeners. Okay, so use more graphical materials, especially in the background information. Don't use the heavy text slides because they kill your kind of keeping off attention of the audience and mind people with problems with eyes. Also, again, even healthy people might have problems reading pale blue on pale green or whitish on yellow, etc. So always think of the high contrast design. And if you now go to Google and write something like high contrast design, you actually might find few tutorials on how to keep your stuff in this paradigm of high contrast design. Okay. So now about the temperature. Well, it's actually about the content. Okay, so a few of you just took enzyme concentration and substrate concentration and left out the temperature. Well, actually, this is a huge problem because you just don't show the materials that were given to you. So what you've done, you show the graph for enzymes, graph for substrate, and when I asked about the temperature, you said, "Oh, we just didn't take it." Why? And you could not explain why. So, guys, main thing here is that content of the presentation is is the driving characteristic for the whole presentation. If you don't have content, then you just don't mind the design, etc. Because well, if you don't have anything to present, then why thinking of the design, right? In this case, content. You already know the enzyme 1 and 2 enzyme 1 and 2 laboratories. You know what they include, and this means that they should be included in your contents. Then, of course, some person who is actually responsible for your content of the presentation, they will choose what to put and what to leave out. But if you know that one of the experiments was on temperature, then why leaving it out? Why just throwing away this huge part of the experiment or the project? And this was something that I did not expect. And of course, people who made this mistake, they will be punished with a reduction of the points. Of course, the reduction will not be kind of critical, etc. But anyway, this is something to think of. This is something to work on. So if you have the project and you just remove a huge part of it, then of course you just kind of lose a huge part that explains a very crucial point of your work. Okay, so what is a project in terms of research? Okay, so you have one line, okay, and your project is actually to understand if this line is actually a shape in 2D or its shape in 3D, or it's actually shape in 4D, because you have the change in time. And every single point here is connected to an appropriate point in the future, etc., etc. So from one line, you go to a huge 4D structure. And in this case, if you just remove one huge part, so let's say you remove this plane here, it means that you just don't show the whole picture, the whole meaning of this experiment and the project. And the main part here is that show your work. If you don't show your work, then why presenting it at all? In your hypothesis, most of you shown that pH, temperature, concentration of enzyme, and concentration of the substrate, they are very crucial for understanding the dynamics or kinetics of your enzyme reaction. And then you show only 2 of those. Well, I understand that we don't have video on pH, and I already told you that you don't have to take it, but we do have temperature. Then why not using it? Okay, so this is about the content part. So again, I did not expect some of you just throwing out the temperature part. It's just like unexpected. Okay, next. Know your work. A few of you made a kind of division of the presentation, and they assigned people who are, again, responsible for the background. So person 1, person 2 was responsible for the results, and person 3 and 4 for the discussion. And when I mixed up people, so I made some kind of redivision or reassignment of the person who is responsible for the work. Those people were lost. Okay, so the person who was doing this discussion representation, they did not know the slides on the background, and vice versa. So the person on the background did not know the results. So this is a huge problem. Why? It's just because you cannot present work on the whole project if you don't know the project. It's again, just let's say you have to explain Alice, okay? And one person just explains A, how the strokes go, and another person explains how to write E. The last person knows how to write Alice, okay? And they don't know that it is actually a whole word. And all they know is that we have some kind of movement of your pen, and you don't know the whole picture. This is what's happening when you assign people that are responsible for some section, and they just don't know the parts, other parts of the project. And this is something that you should kind of should avoid at any cost. If you are working in a team, you have to know your work. You have to know every single word, every single concept that is given in your work. So I've seen also people put in some kind of information like stop solution, in your materials and methods. And when I asked what is stop solution and what are the functions, they were lost. So they just don't know the functions. They don't know why they actually use the stop solution. The main answer was, it is to stop solution. Yes, of course it is, because it's called stop solution, but how it works. So here, what I want you to do, I want you to spend time. Most of you started working just the last week. Again, this is kind of failure, okay? Because we gave you like 1 month before, we gave you the presentation rules, the what we want from you, etc. And you actually failed to start working from that time. You failed to start working from the moment when you had enzyme 1 and enzyme 2 lab. So what we expect from you, we expect you to understand every single part of your work. So if we say that we use stop solution in the manual, okay, we also explain why this stop solution is used. Well, of course, it has the pH which is bigger than 7. Well, this is why it's stopping the solution, stopping the reaction. Why? Because your cellulose, it is working in the range of 4 and 5 pH. Well, somewhere close to this pH. What happens if you add the basic solution to your cellulose? It actually stops working. And why? Because you have the denaturation of the protein. But this is not the end. The other function of this stop solution is to develop a color. We have the substrate, we have the product, p-nitrophenol, and this p-nitrophenol in the basic conditions, it becomes yellow. And this is what we actually measure. So without this stop solution, first of all, we will not be able to stop the cellulose, to denature the cellulose, but we also don't develop the color. And although it is kind of obvious that stop solution is for stopping solution, it's not obvious that it is actually giving you the color. In your manual, it is written that it is given the color. So what I was expecting from you is that if you put it in your presentation, then you have to know everything about it. And it actually does not take much time. So you take every slide of your presentation, and most of the slides were about 10 to 12 units. So you take every single component or every single concept and you Google it. You actually, well, 10 to 12 units, to 10 to 12 slides. Not all of them actually include some kind of concepts or materials that you need to know. Most of them include the graphs. And of course, you could understand every single bit of your presentation by spending an hour or a little more. But you have to do that, because when you start working in the postgrad level, you will have people like PIs from other laboratories, like your own colleagues in your lab, that will be asking questions of knowing the concepts and the materials in your presentation. Why? Because it's it's a teamwork. So if you are working for the lab, it means that every single member of this team should know their work in a very excellent way. Otherwise, the whole lab will be lagging. Let's say that you have a lab of 4 people. So you have your PI, you have one postdoc, you have one PhD, and you are the master. So these 3 guys, they know everything. Well, they actually pretend to know everything. They know everything about their work. And this actually is their expertise. And one MSc, one master, is actually not knowing the work that they do. So what actually happens if the person from the other lab comes to this lab and all of a sudden starts working to master student, not to postdoc or PhD? They understand that this person does not know much about the stuff that they do in this lab. So what it actually tells the person from the outside, it tells them that PI, postdoc, and PhD students, they didn't spend a minute to explain this person the caveats, to explain this person the concepts and the role of the materials, etc., etc. What does it tell? It actually tells you that these guys, they actually don't, I don't want to curse, but, well, they don't care about the work that is done in their lab. And in general, it means that this lab is rubbish. And when you actually come to kind of interview, sometimes people ask to come to the lab to see if they actually fit the lab. So what you have to do when you come, let's say as the interviewee to this lab, you talk to every single person in the lab and understand their level of responsibility, their level of knowledge, their level of project understanding, etc. And you straight away see that if every single person here knows their job, etc., it means that you will learn a lot in this lab because you have 4 other people and every single person has some kind of expertise in their narrow field of the science. And it will tell you that you will benefit a lot from those people because they exchange information. Okay, so this is how the lab is working, etc. So this is why you as the member have to know all the materials, all the methods, all the concepts, etc. Of course, it comes with time. You will not be able to know everything straight away, but you have to spend some time to do that, to do the preparations, etc. Okay, so this is about the bad way of assigning people to specific sections of the presentation. Now about showing something and then also not only be able to explain it, but also you show something and then don't use it. This is also bad because why you load people with information if you don't use it? Okay. So one of the groups said that, okay, so we have this y equal to these numbers, and they actually made all the calculations, etc., etc. And in the end, they said, in the discussion part, they said, but then we removed the intercept. Well, why not showing it straight away? Why showing all the calculations, etc., for these intercept and then saying that it was not okay? So that's what we need to work with. Okay, so if you show something, then explain it, be able to explain it, or use it, or make sure that in the end you don't say something like, we just removed it because we didn't like it, because it just shows the level of preparation for this particular presentation. Okay, as I said before, because this presentation is one of the first presentations that you have in your scientific career, scientific or educational career, it is fine to have all those problems with the showing something, because this is the way how you develop your skill. Okay, and this is actually also something to think of. Okay, so presenting the work. Again, it is related to the assignment of people that will be explaining something on the slides. But also I've seen people who just don't know anything about it, anything about the project. And I don't know how it happened that they don't know it, because, well, again, the whole purpose of this work was was to know the project and know how to present it. So also I've seen people who did not pay attention to the things that they say, they were paying attention to how they pronounce something. This is, guys, this is something that you have to work with. Why? Because you have to be present. You have to be present in this particular point of space and time, or space-time. If you think more about how you sound, then why be in biological department? Why not go into some mass media or the actorship courses, etc., where people actually look at how you sound or how you look? Well, again, think of the content and explain it. And if you explain it in a very cool way, of course, it's really fine. It's the best thing to hear, actually, because when you hear people speaking very beautifully and also they know the content, then it's a real kind of satisfaction. Okay, but if the person just don't know the content and tries to sound cool, well, then I have some questions, and I hope you understand me. Okay, so this is about the presenting of your work. Also, there were people who, again, who thought that when I ask questions, it means that they failed. Guys, you don't fail. There are no stupid questions that you ask. It is something to actually move you from the person who does not know anything, to a person who has some expertise. And this road, this way is impossible if you don't fail, if you don't make mistakes. And a very crucial part here is that you have to have a person who says, who points out those mistakes, etc. And again, if you have the person who says that you failed or you have made a mistake somewhere, it does not mean that you have to put lots of effort, you have to spend lots of forces and time to explain that you actually didn't fail. So one of the group, I had a conversation, well, not a conversation, but I had a member of the group who spent something like a minute to explain why they made this mistake. I don't ask you to explain me why you made the mistakes. I want you to tell me what was the mistake and how to actually overcome it. Okay, I don't care about the problems with connections, with problems with, let's say, manual mistakes, like there was another article used, etc. So guys, I don't care about why you failed. I want you to understand this fail and make sure that you don't make this mistake again. Okay, so don't spend my time, first of all, to explain non-needed stuff. Just accept it. Accept that you could fail, you could make mistakes, etc. You could be mistaken, guys, and everyone could. I am still mistaken, and if you remember, a few days ago I sent you an email explaining the materials and methods of the lab books. So my friend actually saw the video and said, you made a huge mistake there. And I did accept it. Why? Because I want to be an expert somewhere. Okay. And if I'm moving, it means that I will be doing some kind of funny stuff. And this is the real part when you accept your fail, you accept something. It actually will make you get to this point at some point. Okay, so just, you're absolutely fine. For undergrads, failing is must. Okay, you have to make mistakes, otherwise you will not learn anything. Okay, so finally, the main question for the presentations, for any type of assignment, etc. Well, as I saw, many of you chose to panic. First of all, you chose to panic when you postponed the presentation preparation until the deadline. So here we have the deadline and you started somewhere here. So you chose to panic here because you had a choice between starting earlier without any problems, without any hesitation, etc. And then when there were no time left, you decided to start the work. And of course, does it lead to panic? Yes, it does. Then when you started presenting, so how do you choose to panic when you present? It's actually very easy. If you don't know the content, you will be panicking a lot. Okay, so this is something that follows the people who don't know the content. And if you look at those TED Talks, etc., you will see that sometimes the presenter is actually kind of stiff, so they don't feel comfortable. Okay, and you see those signs of panicking, and you could understand straight away that they don't know the content, or they didn't spend much time for preparation, etc., or they just unsure of the things that they say. Just go to TED website and see all those people, and also see the people who are very kind of firm and they know their job, so they are relaxed, they feel comfortable, and it is very satisfactory to listen to them, and you understand everything that they say. Why? Because they chose not to panic. They chose to prepare in advance. They chose to take the content and know it. And this is how you choose between to panic or not to panic. So my recommendation is make sure that you will not be in the position of panicking person when you do the job. Okay. It is also related to the whole scientific career, etc. So to panic or not to panic when you do the experiment. Of course, if you prepare in advance, way before the real experiment starts, then you will not be panicking because you know everything. Everything is under the control. But if you just took the protocol of the experiment 30 minutes before the experiment, well, I guess you know what happens. Okay, so I guess this is the end. And do we have questions, guys? I guess you don't. The things that I want to say again, you made a great job. This is one of the main things that you have to understand. So why you made a huge job here is just because you shown yourself, not to me, your weak points, okay? And now you know what to develop in your work, how to make sure that you become an expert. So the presenting skills are very essential for any person. So again, most of you will be MD in the future, and presentation there happens every single day. It happens when you have every single patient that gets into your cabinet, into your office. Okay. So let's say you are a therapist. The very old person comes to you and they start explaining their problem. So now you have to present your knowledge. You have to show this person that you know what is the problem and how to deal with this problem. So these presenting skills are very essential for the MDs. Also, it is very essential for the people who come to lab. Of course, if you know how to present your work, then you will be able to actually kind of change your work Why? Because you will have some kind of lab meetings, and these lab meetings are usually weekly, made on weekly base, which means that you present your work done during this week. And if you present this work fully, I mean, you present everything that you've done, one of your colleagues, they will point out some weak points. And of course, it will mean for you, it will mean that you made some corrections to your methods, some correction to the interpretation of your results. And of course, it will mean that by a good presentation of your work, you actually develop your project. You make sure that it actually gets to a point of discovery or article, etc., etc. So to some kind of achievement, okay? Even when you become parents yourself, or you become a teacher, whatever happens to you, you always talk to people. And you actually, when you talk to people, you present something. And most of the time, of course, when you have children and you talk to them, you actually present them the whole world. And these presenting skills, they are essential everywhere. So even if you don't get to the lab, even if you don't become the MD, if you just go to some kind of office work, like statistician, etc., you still present your knowledge. This is something important. And I am glad that I was one of the first people who checked or marked your presentational skills. So I guess this is the end of the review session, and I hope we are all clear on what happens, and we are all clear what to actually do for making sure that you get to the point of being expert in something, expert in presenting, etc. So again, next week on Monday, you have your exam. Good luck, and we will see each other on campus, etc. See you guys.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Goodbye,
Thank you.
Professor.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.